So please give him a very warm welcome. Alberto, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, here we are. Good morning, everybody. Option 1 is broken. Well, 3 volunteers on stage for something funny. No, I promise not. So let's start from some book suggestion. How many people here know about this book? Well, kind of dark. Sounds like, yeah, 10–15% of the audience. Well, wrong. We should increase this number. This book is came out probably 1, maybe 2 years ago, but still making an impact. And it's not only about DevOps. I know it's really weird. I mean, I'm the sticky notes guy, and then I'm talking about DevOps, which should be kind of far away. No, it's not. But the idea about this book is a large statistical survey about what actually works in the IT world. And one of the weaknesses of our field is just like a lot of good ideas and experiments have been carried on by individuals or little teams or consultants that could be in one place and not in another one at the same time. So we lack the amount of data needed to say, like, this practice actually works. This is a statistical study, the research that has been actually trying to fill the gap. And, well, let's look a little bit at the numbers. So what is science saying on a large-scale survey? Well, the first answer from this book is just like the idea of DevOps, the idea of quick cycles and the close proximity between development team and the operation is actually really working. Let's look at something about the definition of what is DevOps, and frequent code deployment, fast lead time from commit to deploy, fast recovery from downtime, and lower change failure rate. These were the parameters. And the most interesting part of this is just like how large is the gap between good performance and bad performance. And lead time from commit to deploy is the most striking one, just like up to 400 times faster lead time from an idea to deployment. So it's not like I'm a little bit faster than you. I already deployed 400 times and you're still thinking about the first one, kind of. Okay, so we are not even in the same league anymore. Okay, well, so the problem now that we have data, the problem goes back to the management, and this is a typical solution. So yeah, we hire more DevOps. And so step 1 is just like people go on LinkedIn, add DevOps to their resume. Step 2, somebody's going to hire them. Problem solved. Let's talk about microservices. This is the microservices conference. And talking about microservices, especially, these are the resulting stuff, like more frequently adopted between high performers. So there is some correlation, but not really a significant factor. So the real summary is actually this one. Microservices by themselves are not enough, apparently. Okay, so maybe we should go DevOps and not microservices, pretending that this sentence has some meaning. There's something missing here from the picture, and I think the best summary is a couple of feedback that I got from friends, colleagues like you in random conversation. The first one is one of my colleagues in Denmark said, like, I was the only person in microservices conference to do event-driven. And for me, well, microservices and event-driven are more or less the same thing. And if you're here, maybe you even do agree with this statement. But the only person in, 200 people, what the hell are you doing, guys? And this is something that came from a friend, a software craftsman from Italy. And he said, like, wow, microservices are actually great for my business. But most of my request is just like, we need help to coordinate deployment of multiple microservices. There's something really weird going on here. It looks like that's a common trend in where people do need help. And that's something is not working right. So getting back to the hazard theme, this is what might be the summary. That's the sad part of the summary. So microservices, just like SOA, yes or no, but I think the second part of the sentence is actually really true. Like, we made a mess with SOA in the past, started with a set of good ideas, and then nobody knows exactly what and when happened, and it becomes something incredibly bloated. Looks like the organization can, yeah, take a good idea like microservices and turn it into something completely evil. Okay. So this is the part which is scary. So just like reading a book about microservices and getting them into production in some way is not really saving your day. But there's something more in this research that might be interesting. So one factor on the architectural side that played a fantastic, well, actually, let's say fantastic role, because it is actually changing the day a lot, is loosely coupled architecture. Well, loosely coupled architecture has been noted, researched, and confirmed to be a key differentiating factor. Is not only because architects feels better, oh, now we are loosely coupled, we are the good guys now. It actually works. But this is something that might be thinking a little. Well, somehow microservices were kind of a label for being loosely coupled. What is the main difference between the two things? And I think one of the main traps in our field is more or less what happened in this scenario. Like, you probably have been bouncing on some of those tutorials, how to take a monolith and turn it into microservice. Well, take an entity that maps straight with the table, wrap it in a microservice, and put it to the cloud. End of the story. Good luck. And no, please don't do that. That's exactly the big trap that might happen. So let me be a little bit more explicit. I'm not only being the Batman role in this one. So my take is, if you think strictly about microservices and turning a monolith into microservices, well, actually, the monolith now is the enemy you know, and we have so much power in refactoring capabilities. We still have a lot of political resistance to a good refactoring, but that's not going to go away. But the IDE might be our friend if you want to refactor the monolith. But the moment you take the structure of the monolith and you turn it into microservices, we actually lose a lot of the refactoring capability and probably also a lot of the budget. And the moment you realize that was a bad idea, you run out of budget, you run out of political commitment, and you're going to take an architecture which ends up being less flexible than the one you had before. So this to me sounds like really, really a scary starting point. Even if the technology is actually great, might not lead us exactly where we wanted. Okay. But the book is not only talking about loosely coupled architecture and DevOps and the quick release cycle. Another factor that turns out to be really, really interesting here is culture. And it's not just like, adopting technologies and practice. Well, it just needs an ecosystem to perform. So let's have a little deeper look about what culture might be in this scenario. Well, in the book, they refer to what they call the Western classification, and which is basically division into three categories: pathological, power-oriented, hierarchical, you do this because I told you so; bureaucratic, we follow the rules, there are procedures for everything, we do releases every 6 months because there's so much paperwork to fill up; and generative, where experiments are encouraged and rewarded. This is more or less a scenario. You might find something similar if you have been reading Reinventing Organization, different set of categories, but this is more or less what we're talking about. However, this is a technical conference and not a cultural conference. And this is, for me, also where things are getting weird, because I've been working a lot in the software field. I've been also working as an agile coach and trying to work on transformations and evolution. And the moment people are starting to talk about culture in the technical field, something something happens, like it doesn't feel right. So let me be more explicit. Oh, well, you know, well, that's our company culture. Really feels like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, people are bad. Well, you can even try to write good code, but nothing is going to happen. In Italy, there's, I actually hate the word mentality. Is actually giving alibis for not trying to change stuff. Well, you know, this is our mentality. And what the hell is mentality? I mean, I don't like it as a term, as a definition, but usually that is an excuse preventing us from doing the stuff that we need to do. The other idea is just like, well, if it's a cultural stuff, I am just a software architect. I have nothing to do with culture. I'm just designing good layout for software application. I'm thinking in layers. I'm thinking in boundaries. But I'm not thinking culture. Culture is not my job. Yes, culture is somebody else's job. Probably nobody's job. Still, I don't like this. I really, it's something that drives me nuts. So let me try to take a look at culture in a more actionable way. So I'm going to give you not exactly a definition, because we are definition something more sophisticated, and this is not a precise one, but this is how I see culture, and this is my, again, well, call it definition if you want, but this is mine. Culture is the cumulative effect of the winning behavior within a given context. If I do something and this behavior is perceived like, oh, that's good stuff, well, you might have imitation and people repeating this action, and this becomes a mass effect. That's more or less what I think. It's not a precise definition. I'm not an anthropologist or a sociologist. This is not my stuff. But this is something that, oh, well, this is something I can work with. So let me give some example. And it's actually funny because I mean, the problem with the transportation was not planned, but I'm talking exactly about this. So this is a picture of an Italian bus. This is actually the type of bus I had in my in Bologna, where I was studying at the university. And well, it's orange. You can see this. This is pretty orange, but and has nothing to do with even storming. But you can get on the bus basically from every door, from this, from this, from this. Well, you're supposed to get in mostly from this one, but actually it doesn't matter. You can't buy the ticket on the bus. And you can only buy the ticket in shops, in tobacco shops, and vending machines. And yes, you can jump on many doors. The funny thing is actually a friend of mine from the university, he wanted to make a survey, so we have another statistician here. And his survey was to check whether it was actually cheaper to buy the bus ticket or not to buy the bus ticket. So for 1 year, he decided not to buy the bus ticket. And he actually discovered that it was cheaper not to buy the bus ticket, because he was only caught 3 times. The bill was not big enough to cover for the all expenses, and so he actually proved that for him it was cheaper not to have a bus ticket. It was actually funny because some students were doing it in a professional way, so they knew the controllers by heart. Well, that's a guy with a long mustache. Oh yes, with the friends. So today they are doing this kind of like large-scale police operation, getting from the 3 doors. I mean, narcos didn't need so much police force to be arrested. By people without a bus ticket, yes. But in terms of the social interaction, he actually proven another thing, that this little part of cheating was actually low-risk activity. He didn't risk anything except a little fine. Okay, let's move to another scenario. In some of the places, I saw that, well, the common practice is you buy the ticket on the bus. Well, it might have disadvantages because You might slow down operation because, well, I don't have money for the ticket. I need some. I don't have coins, but there is some interesting different interaction. And then this is actually taken from the Netherlands. I remember last time we were in Amsterdam, it was actually really interesting to discover that there was a second person selling tickets on the bus. And the most interesting situation was we were running to take, actually this is a tram, we were running to take it, so we were getting in from the front door, and we were going in the back to buy the ticket, but at the same time the driver was saying something like, gentlemen, the tickets please. So we had something like 40 people looking at us. We were going to buy the ticket anyway, but then we have kind of the peer pressure of everybody's expectation. You guys have to buy the ticket. Now everybody knows. And it was basically no way out. Even funnier, the very next day on another tram, we went there and somebody said like, "Oh, you don't need the ticket, guys. You're foreigner." So it was the first time in my life that I got offered a free ticket by a controller. Surprising stuff. But if you think about the dynamics of this operation, just like the idea that you have a payment on the bus, it's just enforcing a single entry point. If you don't want to pay the ticket, you still have to have to get eye contact with the bus driver. So if you are cheating, you cannot avoid this. It's just like you have to. Yes, I decided not to pay the bus, you bastard. That doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of social pressure. So everybody's looking at me, and cheating becomes something like a loser behavior. So, and then add imitation to the recipe, and the thing works in a completely different way. So now let's forget about buses. Well, you have a lot of time to think about different buses today. But my summary of this little story is just like you can actually do, and as a software architect, this is what we are supposed to do. We can make design choices. These design choices define interactions in our workplace. And this interaction ends up shaping up the culture, at least of our development teams, maybe also of the entire organization. Let me be more explicit and get back into the software world. So, has everybody been in this situation? I'm the only one in my team trying to do test-driven development. Yeah, you feel the pain. Yeah, and you too. So, this is one of the places where you feel like you have a mission that you're still suffering a lot. Like you write the test, because I'm the good one, I'm writing the test. But if you are sharing the code base with somebody else, well, you're gonna get your colleagues breaking your test because they're not running them. And so as a person doing TDD, you end up doing twice the work. You're coding, you're writing tests, and then you're correcting the tests which are getting read because somebody else changed maybe the data set, maybe the code, maybe something. If you are trying to enforce this, it takes a long time to look like a winning behavior. You actually look like the guy who is struggling and is doing twice of the work, at least at the beginning. And so this is not exactly a winning behavior in this scenario. And in order to change the culture, in order to trigger some improvement, yeah, I really think like we should only pick the battles that we can win. And in order to do that, I discovered, well, I found a couple of thinking tools that are really helpful in this scenario. Let me get into action. Tool number one is what I call the pink check, in order to have a winning behavior. When I say pink, I'm actually thinking about Daniel Pink. If you know about the book Drive, it's a book about motivation. And if you don't have the time to read the book, well, this link to this 15-minute video is actually a game changer, really interesting. What Daniel Pink is saying is just like motivation can actually be summarized by these three main factors. Everybody wants to have autonomy in their work, in their activity. They want to feel like they are performing good, they're showing some mastery, and they need a purpose. If you have these three ingredients, Well, that's basically motivation. Let me get into the softer scenario. This first scenario is a real story. One of the best team in Italy a few years ago, really, really good. I mean, top 5 probably nationwide. They built a great product. The market response was great. The startup was growing. I mean, honeymoon with the code. Positive feedback loops, making money, having users. Well, let's get to the pink check. Talking about autonomy, totally cool. They built it. They knew every corner of it. It is tested. X-peak practices, all good. Talking about mastery, yes, same stuff. There were mistakes. There were adjustments along the way. There were learnings. But yes, the sensation, the feeling of being completely in control. Talking about purpose, well, maybe is one of being in a startup, seeing your code grow and seeing the user base growing is actually giving you so many positive feedback loops. Okay, we're doing it, it's working, people are happy, users are happy, money is flowing, and also the organization is filled up by good people in good mood. What else do we need? So yeah, even that feeling was actually really, really good. Okay, that's a good place where the pink check is preserved. They delivered, and the organization was successful. Second scenario, let's call it the cage team. For some weird twist of the story, is actually the same team as before, only 1 or 2 years later. So the company grew even more successful. They got funding, they got a better financial outlook, and they decided, okay, let's make another bet, let's build another product. But now they started being part of a larger group, and one of the things they decided, instead of building everything from scratch, because it was a good story, but also it was painful in building everything. We can actually be smarter and start building on top of a consolidated platform. And so the idea, now this is a little context map. This was what we can call a conformist scenario. 6 months later, the situation was not exactly as expected. And in terms of autonomy, the autonomy was gone. So they had a team of builders that knew everything about the old platform, and they had a team of survivors on top of somebody else's platform, and they couldn't deliver what they wanted. Even more, they knew that they could deliver without the platform. The platform was actually limiting the movement, because they were good, they were builders, they already built an entire application stack for a successful product. So I did this, of course I can also do that, but doing that on top of the platform, that was a different game. Talking about mastery, well, the mastery was gone. Even more, it was actually gone in an insulting way, because they were building the previous product on top of good practices, and now they were suggested to get back into bad practices, because that's how we do things on this platform. So, kind of insulting somehow. And the purpose, well, after a few months, the purpose was gone, because they were taking the blame for all the bugs in production. They were not putting the bugs were in the platform. So they started just trying to protect themselves, filling in between the users and the platform, not exactly the best place to be. So the purpose was actually gone. So one of the things that I got from this story is, in the domain-driven design community, we thought a lot about bounded context as a unit of consistent modeling, as boundaries of independent model, as tools for loosely coupled architecture. But bounded contexts are also another thing, and which is a unit of clear responsibility. And in this case, the first part of the story, the responsibility was clear. It's our team, it's this code base. We are good. This code base has to work. In the second scenario, it's our team, we have the responsibility, but we cannot really control the whole thing, and the scenario, the happiness is gone, the purpose is gone. Yeah, I needed to put something like a picture of sticky notes on the wall, because because this part of the exploration, I mean, there are advantages in spotting bounded contexts and boundaries inside the organization and a lot of other stuff. But the real thing, the thing that really makes me happy in a few workshops is the fact that in this fog of orange sticky notes, I can actually see this. I can actually see a good business narrative delivering value to somebody, delivering the clarity and making the purpose of an entire organization visible. I had fantastic days in a healthcare company when everything was, there was a lot of mechanical and technical events, and at the end, somebody managed to say, look, at the end, what we need to do is just like making our patients feel better. This is what we are here for. And it was something like, wow, the whole organization finally understood what was the most important thing. Priority were shifted, and we had a great modeling day the morning after. So what I see is the moment we uncover the real purpose of the organization, what are we here for, well, the team becomes something kind of different. A team with a clear purpose is a really powerful weapon. But if you prevent the team to have a purpose, okay, we're just coding, maybe survivors on the code is not really that interesting. I need to go to tool number 2, which is what I call the feedback check. And what I'm looking at, especially for spotting unhealthy workplaces, is look at the feedback loops. So which are the feedback channels? How can we know we're doing a good job? Is there any way we can get the thank you? Who are the people we are making happy? Does anybody care about our software at all? What are we learning? I mean, we as software developers, we are not coders, we are continuous learners. That's really who we are. And more specifically, in terms of the mechanics, how does good and bad feedback arrive, and also the time needed to wait for the feedback? Some of the things are just basic agile. Some others are a little bit more interesting, especially if you split good and bad feedback. We talk about feedback, but that's not the same story. So we talk about DevOps at the beginning. Let's see how this check performs. So we get feedbacks from user metrics right after we release. Sounds like good. Mistakes are removed quickly. Lower cognitive load. I mean, if I wrote some code today, put it in production quickly, discover is wrong, my brain is still wired up on the solution, I can roll it back in 5 minutes. If I make the same deployment 1 week later, what the hell was I thinking last week when I thought about it? Think about 6 months, then your memory is completely gone. So these quick cycles keep the brain under lower pressure from cognitive load. We can actually map the feedback from the users into our ideas, and the learning is actually accelerated. When the learning is accelerated, well, it could actually sparkle new ideas, so we can somehow beat the planning and beat the backlog. It becomes a really conservative choice. And yeah, little warning, feedback have business-specific delays. So if you are in a quick-growing startup, maybe you might be kind of addicted to this feedback user cycle, but it really depends on the business you are in. Let's say if you're making wine, if you make an experiment on the marketing, well, it could have quick cycle, but on the wine making, well, it takes 1 year to make an experiment. If you're doing whiskey, well, it makes 18 years to play experiments. So, well, it takes time to get a good feedback cycle, and you might be frustrated if that feedback loop is really long. So delay is part of it. But delay is something interesting here, because this delay is actually affecting the behavior inside the system. Again, one observation, which is not a definition, but I saw it happening many times. People want to improve a system if they won't stay around long enough to see the benefits. It's something like if you go to a hotel room and it's ugly, you're not going to repaint it. If you're living in an apartment for two months, you're taking it as it is. If you're living in the same apartment for 6 months, oh, maybe you start thinking about it. If you buy in the apartment, well, you're going to repaint it, because I don't want to live the whole of my life with in a house with brown walls. And so, but this is interesting for me, because it is giving me a boundary for changes that might happen or not. And it also helps me to make this confrontation in terms of its time expectation versus time expectation. So the comparison might be interesting. So if my life expectancy is shortened, the time to enjoy the benefits of a given action, well, I won't improve the system. The moment I decide to leave an organization is maybe the moment I stop writing good code with comments. Who is going to read these comments anyway? I'm already on LinkedIn. I'm going away. But this is also something that might happen if you have short-term contractors. Well, maybe their time horizon is a lot shorter than your expected life expectancy for the project. Or it might be the other way around. You're in a growing startup. You're building code, thinking like, this is going to be my castle. I want to live here forever. But your boss is planning to make an exit. And so your boss is pushing for adding new features to increase the apparent value of the organization, and then leaving and basically selling the technical debt to the next buyer. So if the two horizons are not aligned, it's very hard to build something which is growing in the right way. Yep. So I went back to the original one. It's exactly the same slide as before. The point is, if you combine the two things about quick cycles and this kind of rule of thumb about delays, you get an interesting conclusion, which is if the feedback loop is too long, some systems are not improving at all. If you have a system where it takes 6 months to release new changes, and everybody's a contractor with a 3-month horizon, I'm not even trying to improve the system. I'm just surviving. I'm piling up stuff here and then going away. The system is not even having the slightest possibility of improvement. So this was not intended to scare you. You might want to, take a look at the homework if you want to make this check. Look at the feedback loops for activities in your organization, like refactoring, test-driven architecture, architectural migration, or getting a training. And how much time does it take to make a change? And you might get some disturbing results. OK. One example of this one might actually be this one. That's a conversation. I was talking with, this was the boss in an organization, and this is the team. So the boss is saying, like, whenever my team asks anything, I try to fulfill the request. Then he talked with the team, and just like, we don't even try to ask. It's really so complicated to get anything done, and we only ask stuff when our boss has no possibility of saying no. So this is the same conversation seen from different angles, and that's a consequence. OK, let's get back to software. And let's see this another scenario that I've seen in this year. And that's an international corporation, and they described me. I actually discovered what was their release cycle. So they were organized in this way. There was a product team working on new features. I was trying to see who's going to be the users of your software. It was really, really hard to find out who was the end user of them. OK, well, it was clear who was the end user, but nobody ever had the chance to get in touch with the real user, because the product team was developing more or less 9 months of new features. Then they were handed off to national teams that were following national regulation. I mean, complicated domain, I admit that. And they were finishing the local version. Once the local nationalized version was finished, it was handed over to another team that was doing local installation in local organization. So for a feature to get to production, oh, well, that's quite a long time to be waited. And my summary, I would never, ever work in a place like that. Actually, the boss was happy to see, like, yes, that's exactly how it should work. And this would never, ever work. I cannot be like this. But it was hard for me to explain that. I mean, my stomach was rumbling, but I didn't have anything scientific to say no because of what. So, well, this is something more structured to tell why not. Talking about autonomy, not a single unit was able to deliver value. So it could always be somebody else's fault. Talking about the mastery was not an issue. Well, the main thing was not being blamed. It was almost impossible to be fantastic. Talking about the purpose, well, the organization was actively preventing developers from having one. You had no possibility to find the user happy and have a conversation. So now let's do the feedback check. Talking about the positive feedback, well, on average, 15 months before, before releasing a feature in production. I have an idea, well, maybe in 15 months, somebody's going to be happy about it. That's kind of annoying. Just like if I prepare a good dish of carbonara, I want my family to say, wow, Dad, that was great in 2 minutes, not in 15 months. But we are software developers, we can wait for that, especially if somebody's telling you were right, but that's another story. Second thing, no direct contact with the end user. Only working on specification, and the release goes to a middleman, maybe the product owner, maybe somebody else, but it's the person saying like, oh, yes, oh, people are really going to love this carbonara in 15 months. You don't really trust this person. It's not anything like real feedback. Talking about the negative feedback, oh, well, that's a different story. Could happen at any time after release. No control over the reason. I mean, you have a chain of people downstream in another office in another city. You have no idea if they understood your code, if you misunderstood the specification, or if the specification were wrong. Basically, whatever it might happen has nothing to do with what you were doing. It's not like the DevOps cycle. You put something in production, bad feedback, oh, sorry, now I know. You did something wrong 15 months ago. Yes, of course, I have no idea what I was doing 15 months ago. Did I do something wrong? Yes. But what? And so there's something nasty here when you put together the negative feedback and the delay, which yes, has to do with feeling guilty. Let me be more explicit. So that's a graphical representation of this scenario. At the end of the, maybe 15 months, you had the tiny possibility of somebody saying thank you, that was great code. In terms of emotion, this is just like a big reward deprivation system. So the organization is designed to prevent the possibility of somebody telling you thank you. Well, that's exactly where I want to work. At the same time, you have extra benefits, which is at random interval, you can be blamed for something that you've done, or maybe not, but it goes on you. There's a bug to fix, an emergency in production, or some code that somebody in your team wrote 2 years ago. It might happen at random times, well, just to keep you awake. I mean, nobody is living in a place like this. So, on the punishment side, you can be punished at random intervals for something that you haven't done. Fantastic, I want to work in this place. So, and that's only one of the scenarios. Scenario number 2, this is from last year, big Italian bank. So I have a team which is trying to do good stuff, and on microservices architecture. Once again, microservices by themselves are not enough. And the new service is going to be dependent on 12 external services, synchronously. And the new service is under strong SLAs, and the external services are not reliable. When I say not reliable, they actually told me, in the last 6 months, we never seen the 12 services up and running at the same time. Still, you have an SLA on top of it, so you have to be running at least 99 point something on top of who is there. So let's get to the pink check. Autonomy, no, at the mercy of those enemies. Mastery, well, does it matter? I mean, the whole idea is so messed up that it's built on sand. And what is the purpose? Well, the purpose is blaming somebody else, not being the one in the middle. So from a context mapping perspective, this is the architectural view of this. You're conformist on 12 different external systems. In terms of patterns, it's pretty clear what we're talking about. That's design up front, and this is not exactly conformist, that's capable, yeah. And let's get to the feedback check. We did the pink check. Feedback, very low probability of things working, no direct contact with the end user. Well, looks like we are some sick or toxic. Developers are always in quarantine for some reason. And again, working on specification, and again, working to talking to a middleman only. At the same time, the negative feedback can happen at any time for, yes, precisely a dozen of reasons, no control, and always disconnected from what you were doing. Again, what is a dominant feeling in such a place? It's fear. I mean, it's from the architectural perspective, this is a workplace designed for fear. So this might be the recruitment conversation, like this job will allow you to experience a continuous state of fear, anger, and guilt, not to mention frustration and despair. So in general, software developers, if you've been working for them, they're absolutely okay in paying for their own mistakes. Wow, was it me writing this line of code? I will correct it, yeah. But they actually hate paying for somebody else's mistake. Doing extra hours to fix somebody else's, yeah, one day might be okay. 2 days in a row, no. Safety, responsibility, and pride are actually ingredients that are part of the idea of a bounded context, but also something that we can build on. When we talk about loosely coupled architecture, I actually think a lot about the idea of autonomy and how does it play in the organization. Let me be more specific. Like, if we don't have loosely coupled architecture, we probably need a lot of meetings to agree on a different shape of something. Refactoring on a shared resource, well, it takes ages on the political side. Maybe it's just like a few lines of code, but we need to reach the agreement. And this is frustrating. This is, we like coding, but we spend a lot of time in meeting, trying to convince somebody that we need to write those few lines of code. How many external entities are we depending upon? How many trade-offs? How many, we know how good code looks like, but we can't write the good code that we like because, political reason. And I still wanted to talk about architecture, but yeah, the shape of architecture, the amount of dependency, the way we are coupled with other teams and other pieces of the landscape is actually affecting the interaction and ending up shaping the culture once again. So, getting to the summary. Action number 1, buy a copy of this book and buy a copy for your boss too. Put it under the Christmas tree, surprise. Yeah, that actually works. Second thing is everything is connected for me. I've been doing, again, software architect, agile coach, now working also on organization and getting back to code. There is not a single piece of this space which is orthogonal. Like, well, the organization is working fine, I'm just thinking about the code. No, you're touching the wires. The organization is skilling the code, maybe via recruiting practices, and the code is skilling the organization while we know how. The second thing is emotion really matter. Just we cannot think like, oh, we are just supposed to be professional, we are just supposed to code our way through new architecture. We just perform a lot better if we can get in touch with the real purpose of the organization, of our work, of the team. And just like a healthy team is smiling, is having fun, an unhealthy team, well, that's a completely different place, and the productivity is completely different. This is the same slide that before, and I think this is still a good summary. Your architectural choices will shape interaction and culture. If you take a shared entity and put it into a microservice, while that microservice will be a source of dependency and blame from every other team which might be depending upon. You don't want to design a place where blame becomes once again the dominating factor. You don't want to be there. In terms of bounded context, and which is the DDD way to perceive the space in microservices land, is it is by definition a unit of language consistency. It is also a unit of purpose. It's only a little bit harder to find the purpose upfront to understand what might be the ideal model for this purpose, but it is also a unit of responsibility. We are doing this model, we're implementing this model for this reason, for these people, to make them happy. And once the boundaries are set, it's also a unit of pride. This code is working, we did this code must be great because we are good. Safety matters. So if the boundaries are not clear, there's kind of no possibility to do a great job, because then it's, well, you know, it's raining, the roof is broken, yes, it's wet, there's nothing we can do about it, let's call it, it's a cultural problem. No, I don't want to be there, just like fix the boundaries, make a place where you can do great stuff, but you need safety for that. And double check for your safety, make sure your long-term goals are aligned with the organization one. Unfortunately, the shortest one usually tends to be dominating on the overall landscape. To close, I think the most important part of this reasoning is you really got to find your purpose and look for, if you know what this thing is all about, if you know which people are you actually helping, if you can see the difference that a given piece of code is actually bringing in your organization or in your user or customer base, then this actually makes a lot of difference. So that is the closing part. And yes, there might be a few references, but on my territory. But I think, yeah, that's. Sorry, I wanted to do something different, but for some reason I can't. So that's it. So,